If you've been following my channel for a while, you're probably used to me complaining about the problems in the Naruto anime and how much worse it is than the manga. One of the most watched videos on my channel is me doing exactly that. But today, I would like to do the opposite. I'll talk about why the Jiraiya versus Pain fight was actually better in the anime than in the manga, which is not something that happens often, but it happens from time to time. And this is gonna be interesting for you, especially if you haven't read the manga, because the Jiraiya versus Pain fight is surprisingly different between the two mediums, so let's explain why. And everything begins in the very start of the Jiraiya the Gallant arc. Now, the Naruto anime tends to do this thing of adding new scenes that weren't in the manga in canon arcs and episodes. And usually those scenes are terrible, they just tank the pacing of the story, they are usually poorly animated, and they tend to have bad writing. And I'm not talking about additional scenes in the fights, for example, when they expand on the taijutsu exchange or a couple of new ninjutsu, but rather story elements, even flashbacks that were not in the manga. This happens in the Jiraiya the Gallant arc when Jiraiya infiltrates the Rain Village, but in here, it works. We see Jiraiya doing more spy work than he does in the manga, interrogating people from the Rain Village itself, which increases the tension in the arc, and it makes the mystery of who Pain is more enticing. Jiraiya goes around the Rain Village asking about Pain to just villagers and normal people, and even a lady of the night. Those scenes are mostly not in the manga. He only interrogates those two rain ninjas he entraps in the Toad's stomach in the manga. But in the anime, we actually get to see how Jiraiya got to those guys, because the lady of the night who Jiraiya was talking to was actually one of those guys' wife. So those additional scenes are actually pretty interesting. Now, moving on to the fight itself. Even before Jiraiya engages Pain, his fight against Konan, which is very brief, is better in the anime as well. Now, both in the manga and in the anime, this fight's pretty quick. However, there is this very cool exchange between Jiraiya's fire style and Konan's barrage of papers in the anime that does not happen in the manga. The fire and papers clash, and that's just very cool to see. It makes the fight more dynamic, and that's a very unique shot, and not present in the manga at all. Because in the manga, Jiraiya just kinda dodges a few papers, spits oil on Konan, and then entraps her with his hair, and that's it, the fight's done. And one important thing here too is that the animation for this episode, and the subsequent episode when Pain actually shows up, is well made, unlike many other times in the Naruto series, even for important fights when the animation wasn't so great. Like, take a look at pretty much any war arc fight, and it's gonna be pretty awfully animated, save from a few exceptions. Now, when Pain shows up, the anime hits the same beat story-wise as the manga does, but there are a few changes, or should I say additions, that simply do not happen in the manga and should have happened in the manga because they're actually interesting. The first major addition is Jiraiya fighting against the animal path, as his hands are combined together because he's trying to summon Ma and Pa. And he is very much handicapped here. He cannot use jutsus properly. He can only use the summoning jutsu that he used before, bringing Gamaken, and then he has that weird barrier jutsu that he used with his feet, but he's pretty much a sitting duck there. So Gamaken has to do a lot of the work. And that's a very cool scene when Jiraiya goes around the Rain Village fighting against the animal path summons. The multi-headed hound gives Gamaken a lot of trouble. There's also that weird bird that kind of poops out explosive eggs. And yes, that fight happens in the manga, but it's very quick. You barely see anything. Gamaken blocks the bird's beak with his hat shield, and there's that cool shot of that building in the middle of the Rain Village kind of exploding all around as Gamaken is clashing with a multi-headed hound, but the fight is like completely skipped over. All of a sudden, you don't even see where Gamaken is anymore. Jiraiya simply bamfs away that bull-like creature from the animal path, and he has summoned Ma and Pa and is on sage mode already. So you don't see exactly how Jiraiya deals with the multi-headed hound, the bird, and you don't see what the hell happened to Gamaken in the manga. They simply disappear from the story. And the first time I read the manga, because I watched the fight before, a long time ago when I started reading the Naruto manga for the first time, I was a little baffled because I was like, wait, what? Did I skip a page or a chapter or something because I didn't see that? And no, it's actually just not in the manga, which is weird. This fight has those strangely skipped over moments that are not shown, and it feels like they should have been shown because they are in the anime and it makes more sense there. Now, this actually works great for the anime because the anime is always looking for opportunities to pad the runtime so the anime wouldn't catch up to the manga. And if there's a chunk of the fight that's actually missing in the manga, oh, that's great. Let's just do that in the anime so we deliver upon some interesting information and we pad the runtime at the same time, which in here will actually work in our favor for both not catching up to the manga and delivering the audience more useful information and a cool fight scene. Because Gamaken versus the multi-headed hound is a very cool fight in the anime. As I said, it's really well animated. Gamaken hopping around the rain village, fighting against this pretty powerful summon from the animal path is a very epic scene because it feels like Jiraiya is backed into a corner, which he is. And the backdrop of the rain village, which is this very unique environment in the Naruto universe, just makes the fight really cool. We also see how Jiraiya deals with a multi-headed hound, which is an incredibly difficult summon for you to defeat. If you don't take the animal path out to dismiss all the summons, which is what Naruto does in the fight against Pain, you have to use some sort of hack to defeat the multi-headed hound, and this is exactly what Jiraiya does. He summons the Great Toad Stomach and swallows the animal path's multi-headed hound, which doesn't happen in the manga, but I assume this is how Jiraiya took care of it in the manga as well. It's just that it was skipped over. We also see Jiraiya hitting the bird with a massive fire-style jutsu, destroying it, which we don't see in the manga, and for once, fire-style did something in the Naruto series. Isn't that great? It's just not in the manga, but like, it was useful that one time. So that's the first really good addition to the Jiraiya vs. Pain fight that does not happen in the manga. But there's more actually. Now, Sage Mode Jiraiya vs. Pain is pretty much identical. They don't add or take away anything in that stage of the fight, but things start to change again after Pain ambushes Jiraiya, taking him from behind and exploding one of his arms, revealing the 6 paths of Pain. They exchange the same dialogue as they do in the anime and the manga, but when Pain says, "We are Pain, we are God," and jump down to Jiraiya, attacking him all at once, in the manga they simply cut away. So you don't see exactly what happens, and they cut away to the characters taking care of the Itachi Pursuit mission. And when we go back to Jiraiya vs. Pain, the next thing we see is Jiraiya in the frog's stomach, pierced by the animal path's Renegon rod. Like, it completely changes the scene. We're just like, wait, where is Jiraiya? Is he somewhere else? Oh, okay, it's at frog's stomach, but we didn't see how he got there, or how the animal path got there, or how the animal path got into the acid. That is completely skipped over, and it's also one of those moments that the first time I read the Naruto manga I was like, wait, what? How did we get here? Did I skip a chapter again? And no, it's how the manga is, because there's a difference in the Jiraiya fight in the anime and in the manga, because in the anime it's much more continuous. The fight doesn't really cut between other things, but in the manga it's constantly cutting between the Jiraiya vs. Pain fight and Naruto and his team in the Itachi Pursuit mission, especially towards the end of the fight. One interesting thing that the anime does is to show us how Jiraiya drew that path of Pain into the Toad's stomach, and also a little bit of the fight between Jiraiya and all 6 paths of Pain at once. Because when the 6 paths rush Jiraiya, there's that quick taijutsu exchange when Jiraiya is like trying to fend off against 6 of them at the same time, and we see the paths using their powers. We even see Tendo using his powers for a little bit, which does not happen in the manga at all. The first time Tendo uses Shinra Tensei or Bansho Tenin is gonna be in the Pain arc during the Leaf Village invasion, but in the anime we actually get to see a glimpse of it in the Jiraiya fight. Tendo doesn't scream Shinra Tensei or Bansho Tenin or anything like that, but we can clearly see him using the powers to pull that massive concrete section into Jiraiya. We also get to see a toad wrapping its tongue around the feet of the animal path and dragging him into its belly, and that's when Jiraiya lands a Rasengan on the animal path, dropping him into the acid. The animal path then comes out of the acid, surprising Jiraiya because he actually survived the Rasengan and pierces him with a Rinnegan rod, and that's where the manga picks up. There's another thing that the anime does that the manga does not, and this one I think is really well thought out by the anime's part, and it sort of comes out of nowhere in the manga if you're just reading the manga and you didn't have previous information about what Jiraiya is going through in the moment. You see, what gives away that the paths of Pain are actually just bodies being controlled from afar is the animal path's forehead, because the animal path's headband falls off and Jiraiya sees the scar he put on that guy a long time ago when he was actually alive. And that's when Jiraiya's like, oh, hold on a second, I have to go out there and check something out because I think I could have figured out who Pain actually is. So Jiraiya goes out, he looks at all the paths of Pain, and he remembers, oh, I've seen all these people before, and they're all like weird, red-haired guys with piercings. Oh, I understand, the real one's not among them. He passes the message to Fukasaku, which eventually Naruto is going to decipher in the Leaf Village. But the problem is that in the manga, that scene kinda comes out of nowhere, because when Jiraiya is looking at the paths of Pain and realizing he's seen all those faces before, that's the first time you're hearing about that. The only 2 paths we have deeper information about regarding Jiraiya and his backstory are going to be Tendo Tendo, obviously with Yahiko and the Animal Path, and the story of his encounter with that dude when Jiraiya says, "Give up trying to make me give up for the first time," and that's what he makes into the story of his first book. But all the other paths, the 4 others, are just like, oh, okay, so Jiraiya's seen them before, that's the first I'm hearing of that, and Jiraiya's just looking at them, and we even see, oh, okay, there's that face, and that path, and that face, and that path, and obviously Yahiko's, which is the most telling one, because when Jiraiya first sees Tendo, he's like, what? Yahiko, you have a Rinnegan? So that comes kind of out of nowhere in the manga, but in the anime, I am going to say something that may be sacrilegious, but the additional flashbacks were actually good. Now, 99% of the time, when the anime adds flashbacks that were not in the manga, it's going to tank the pacing, make the story worse. This has happened several times in the anime, and it gives Naruto a really bad rap for being a slow story, and I talk more about this in depth in my Why the Naruto Manga is Better Than the Anime video. Just look at the Madara versus Guy fight, for example. They stretch Guy's flashback into oblivion and tank the pacing of the fight, making it so much worse in the anime. Because the thing is, the flashbacks in the Naruto manga are 95% of the time great. They are almost always going to be very tightly written to make the pacing of the fight go, to deliver the important information and the emotional beat as the fight is going on, and not make it feel dragged out, unlike the anime. So when the anime does those things, stretching the flashbacks, it feels like the Naruto flashbacks are a chore, but when you read them in the manga, they are actually extremely interesting, and they make the fights better. However, one time when additional flashbacks were useful and interesting was right here, because in the anime we get to see Jiraiya's travels a little bit more than we do in the manga. We see Jiraiya going around the world trying to find the child of prophecy he was foretold to be the teacher of, and during those travels in the flashback, we see Jiraiya encountering every single path before they were paths. And those are mostly pretty quick scenes. It doesn't linger on them too much, and it doesn't spoil the surprise because the paths look very different when they're paths than when they were alive. Their hair colors are all different, they don't have the piercings, they obviously don't have the Rinnegan, but it just builds up that particular moment of the fight so much better, and it gives a little bit more context to it that you're like, oh yeah, Jiraiya met them all, that's interesting, oh okay, something's going on here. You realize pretty much at the same time as Jiraiya does because you weren't really paying too much attention. Now obviously Tendo is clearly Yahiko, but the others were a mystery until Jiraiya sees them all, and you're like, yeah, they were in Jiraiya's flashback, he's seen them all before, what's going on here? Which also contributes to the ongoing mystery of what the hell is pain. It makes the moment, I would say, less forced than in the manga, because in the manga, Jiraiya's just like seeing them all, that's kinda convenient, but at least when you see the flashbacks and the reason why it happened, Jiraiya going all around the world, it makes so much more sense. Also, because Jiraiya's traveled a lot, if there's someone who has probably seen a lot of people in his lifetime, and the odds of seeing all those 6 paths back when they were alive are better, that person is gonna be Jiraiya. And because in the anime we get to see Jiraiya meeting them all, it makes it more satisfying when Jiraiya realizes that he's seen all those faces before among the paths of pain. Those are very interesting improvements to the Jiraiya versus Pain fight. However, there's something that is worse in the anime, and the manga just does it much better. And this one actually has to do with the Jiraiya versus Pain fight cutting between the Itachi Pursuit team very often. Now, during the final stages of Jiraiya's fight there, the Konoha Pursuit team is fighting against Tobi as Tobi is trying to delay them so they don't get to Itachi and Sasuke's location. In the anime, that doesn't really happen. The 2 fights happen one after the other without them cutting in between, and the Jiraiya fight comes first. So you don't get the added benefit of cutting in between the fights, which, yeah, in the manga that allowed Kishimoto to kind of skip over some parts of the fight between Jiraiya versus Pain. However, it also allowed Kishimoto to do something very interesting and clever as Jiraiya died. It is one of the most emotional scenes in the series after all, as Jiraiya plummets down the ocean and realizes Naruto as his great victory in life, and he is the child of prophecy. And that's very well done and sad and everything. And it's not bad in the anime, not at all. I'm just gonna say that it's better in the manga because there's an interesting thing Kishimoto does cutting between the 2 fights. Before Jiraiya dies, the last thing that happens in the Tobi versus Konoha 12 fight there is that Tobi kicks Naruto into a water pond, and then they cut back to the Jiraiya fight. Jiraiya then dies, plummets down the ocean, and figures out the name for his sequel novel, The Tale of Naruto Uzumaki. And because the anime is cutting between those 2 fights, when that happens, when Jiraiya plummets down the ocean thinking that, and the scene gets all dark, the panel cuts to Naruto kind of exploding out of the pond of water in this dark silhouette, which just makes the moment more poetic, and it's a very artistic shot, connecting master and apprentice, almost by the strings of destiny. As Jiraiya is plummeting down the ocean, Naruto is rising out the water, and it simply gives even more impact to what just happened to Jiraiya and the mission Naruto has now. In the anime, Naruto just rises back from the water, but that's not after Jiraiya plummets down the ocean, and it's just like, oh, okay, he fell in the water, he rose from the water, that's fine. The scene does not have the same impact. So even though Jiraiya vs. Pain had a lot of improvements in the anime over the manga, that particular moment of the fight was way better in the manga. So for this one, I would recommend you to go read the fights and then watch the fights, see the differences, it's very interesting. And if you would like other videos talking about differences in fights or moments between the anime and the manga, let me know in the comments below, because there are several of these differences in important moments that I would like to talk about. If you want to find out why the Naruto manga is so much better than the anime in a more comprehensive way, definitely watch this video right here. It's one of the most watched videos on the channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring notifications. Those things are really important, and thank you so much for watching.